Picture stepping into a world where architecture reached for the heavens and art mirrored the revolutionary spirit transforming society. Close your eyes and envision towering Gothic spires piercing the clouds, while down in the streets, artists captured life with bold new techniques never seen before. Welcome to the 19th century, an age where imagination knew no bounds and beauty took on entirely new forms. Have you ever wondered what made this era so extraordinary for art and architecture? What sparked this incredible burst of creativity that changed the way we see the world forever? The 19th century wasn't just another 100 years in history. It was a time when everything changed. Steam engines roared to life, transforming quiet countryside into bustling industrial centers. Nations were rising, falling, and being reborn. In the midst of all this chaos and change, artists and architects found their voice, creating works that would leave us speechless even today. Think about it. In just one century, we moved from the elegant simplicity of neoclassicism with its clean lines and perfect proportions to the wild organic curves of Art Nouveau. Each style tells its own story, each building holds its own secrets, and each painting captures a moment in this remarkable time of transformation. You know what's fascinating? Many of the architectural marvels we admire today were considered shocking, even outrageous when they were first unveiled. The Eiffel Tower, now the beloved symbol of Paris, was originally condemned by many artists and intellectuals as an eyesore that would ruin the city's skyline. If you're passionate about history and ready to uncover the secrets behind the 19th century's greatest masterpieces, you're in the right place. Join me on Modern Age Chronicles as we embark on an incredible journey through time, exploring the art and architecture that shaped our modern world. Like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make sure you don't miss a single episode of our historical adventure. Let's dive into the story of how art and architecture changed forever. Let's travel back to a time when artists and architects were having what you might call an artistic rebellion. But imagine walking through the streets of 18th century Europe, where every building and palace was dripping with ornate decorations, swirling golden details, and almost dizzying patterns. This was the world of Baroque and Rococo, where more is more was the unofficial motto. But then something fascinating happened. Artists and architects started looking back to ancient Greece and Rome for inspiration, thinking, maybe less really is more. This was the birth of neoclassicism, a movement that said goodbye to all that elaborate decoration and hello to clean lines, perfect proportions, and elegant simplicity. Here's a fun bit of history for you. This movement wasn't just about art. It was deeply connected to the exciting archaeological discoveries happening at the time. The ruins of Pompeii had just been unearthed, and suddenly everyone was obsessed with all things classical. Artists weren't just copying old styles. They were rediscovering the beauty of ancient wisdom. The perfect example of this new way of thinking stands proudly in Paris, the Arc de Triomphe. When Napoleon Bonaparte commissioned Jean Chalgrin to design it, he wanted something that would make ancient Roman arches look modest in comparison. And boy, did Chalgrin deliver. The Arc de Triomphe became not just a celebration of Napoleon's victories, but a masterpiece of neoclassical design. You might be wondering what makes this arch so special. Well, look at its clean lines, its perfect proportions, its powerful simplicity. There's not a single unnecessary flourish or decoration. Every element serves a purpose, just like in ancient Greek and Roman architecture. The sculptures tell stories of victory and valor, but they do it without the theatrical drama of Baroque art. Here's something most people don't know. When Chalgrin was designing the Arc de Triomphe, he actually studied the Arch of Titus in Rome for inspiration. But instead of just copying it, he created something bigger, bolder, and more ambitious. It's like he took the best of ancient architecture and supersized it for the modern age. The influence of neoclassicism wasn't limited to architecture. Painters started creating scenes that looked like they could have been carved in marble, with precise lines and careful composition. Even furniture design changed, with craftsmen replacing curved legs and ornate carvings with straight lines and simple geometric patterns. This wasn't just a style, it was a revolution in thinking about beauty. Neoclassicism taught us that sometimes the most powerful statements are the simplest ones, and that lesson still influences designers and architects today. Just when everyone thought art was all about order and reason, along came a movement that turned everything upside down. Welcome to Romanticism, where emotions ruled supreme and artists weren't afraid to wear their hearts on their canvases. Think of it this way. If Neoclassicism was like a perfectly composed symphony, Romanticism was more like wild jazz, full of passion, improvisation, and raw feeling. Artists suddenly broke free from the rigid rules of classical art and started painting what they felt rather than just what they saw. No one embodied this spirit better than Eugène Delacroix. Picture this. It's 1830, and the streets of Paris are alive with revolution. Delacroix doesn't just observe. He feels every moment, every emotion, and pours it all into what would become his masterpiece, Liberty Leading the People. Here's a fascinating backstory. Delacroix didn't just imagine this scene, he lived it. He witnessed the July Revolution firsthand, breathing in the gunpowder smoke, hearing the cries of freedom, feeling the energy of a people rising up against tyranny. When he picked up his brush, he wasn't just creating a painting, he was capturing a moment that would inspire generations. In Liberty Leading the People, every brushstroke tells a story. Liberty herself isn't some calm, classical goddess. She's a fierce, determined woman of the people, her dress torn, her flag waving, leading citizens from all walks of life toward freedom. The painting practically moves before your eyes, filled with smoke, drama, and raw human emotion. Let me share something incredible about this period. Artists started traveling to exotic places, seeking inspiration in wild landscapes and foreign cultures. They painted stormy seas, mysterious forests, and dramatic mountain peaks. They weren't interested in the perfect symmetry of classical art. They wanted to capture the untamed beauty of nature and the depths of human passion. Speaking of innovation and passion, here's an amazing fact that shows how this era was transforming in every way. While artists were revolutionizing painting, architects were creating equally bold statements. The Crystal Palace, built for the Great Exhibition of 1851, was completed in just 9 months, an architectural feat that seemed almost impossible at the time. They used a groundbreaking technique called prefabrication, where parts were made in factories and assembled on site, like a giant glass and iron puzzle. The Romantic movement wasn't just about art, it was about seeing the world through new eyes. These artists taught us that beauty isn't always about perfection. Sometimes it's about capturing the raw, unfiltered essence of life itself. They showed us that emotions, love, fear, hope, anger, are universal languages that speak across centuries. And you know what's truly remarkable? The influence of Romanticism never really ended. Every time you see an artist breaking the rules, following their heart, or using their work to fight for freedom, you're seeing the spirit of Romanticism alive and well in our modern world. Now let me tell you about a time when architecture literally reached for the stars. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about steam engines and factories. It was about completely reimagining what was possible in construction. Imagine walking through a city where stone and wood had ruled for centuries, and suddenly seeing buildings that seemed to defy gravity itself. The hero of this architectural revolution, iron. Yes, that humble metal that had been around for ages was about to transform the world in ways no one could have dreamed of. But here's the thing. When architects first suggested using iron as a main building material, people thought they were absolutely crazy. A metal tower in the middle of Paris? Preposterous, they said. Speaking of which, let me tell you about the most controversial building project of the 19th century, the Eiffel Tower. When Gustave Eiffel proposed his design, many of Paris's most prominent artists and intellectuals were horrified. They called it a gigantic black smokestack that would ruin their beautiful city. Some even claimed it would collapse in the first strong wind. But Eiffel was a brilliant engineer who knew exactly what he was doing. Here's a fascinating detail. The tower was designed to sway slightly in the wind, like a giant tree. During construction, Eiffel was so confident in his calculations that he personally climbed the tower several times to inspect the work, often taking his lunch at dizzying heights. Over in London, something equally revolutionary was happening. Joseph Paxton, who started his career as a gardener of all things, designed the Crystal Palace. Now picture this, a building made almost entirely of glass and iron, covering 19 acres of Hyde Park. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen before, a giant greenhouse that could house an entire exhibition. The Crystal Palace was so ahead of its time, it's almost hard to believe it was built in 1851. Want to hear something amazing? The entire structure was built using standardized parts, like a massive construction kit. This meant they could put it together in just 9 months, a feat that would be impressive even by today's standards. These iron pioneers didn't just change how we build, they changed how we think about architecture. They showed us that buildings could be both beautiful and technologically advanced. The Iron Revolution proved that sometimes the most stunning achievements come from embracing new ideas and technologies, even when everyone else thinks you're crazy. You know what makes this story even more incredible? Many of the techniques developed during this time are still used in modern skyscrapers. Every time you look up at a glass and steel tower reaching into the clouds, you're seeing the legacy of these 19th century innovators. Speaking of amazing construction feats, isn't it mind-blowing that the Crystal Palace was built in just 9 months? If you're enjoying these fascinating stories about architectural innovation, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Modern Age Chronicles for more incredible historical tales. And I'd love to hear from you. Which 19th century architectural style amazes you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let me take you back to Paris in 1874, where a group of artists were about to turn the art world on its head. Imagine walking into a small studio on Boulevard des Capucines, where paintings unlike anything ever seen before hung on the walls. The critics were horrified. They called it unfinished, sketch-like, even an insult to academic art. Little did they know they were witnessing the birth of modern art. These rebels were the Impressionists, and they had a revolutionary idea. What if painting wasn't about perfectly polished scenes, but about capturing the fleeting moments of life itself? Their leader, though he would have hated being called that, was Claude Monet. Picture him setting up his easel at dawn in the port of Le Havre, racing to capture the rising sun before the light changed. The painting he created that morning, Impression Sunrise, would accidentally give the movement its name when a critic used it mockingly. Here's a delicious bit of artistic gossip. The first Impressionist exhibition was actually held in the former studio of a photographer because no respectable gallery would show their work. The artists had formed their own independent society after being repeatedly rejected by the official Paris Salon. Talk about turning lemons into lemonade. Edgar Degas was another revolutionary figure, though he preferred working indoors. He was obsessed with movement, particularly the grace of ballet dancers. But unlike traditional artists who painted perfectly posed figures, Degas caught his subjects in natural, sometimes awkward moments, stretching, adjusting their shoes, or practicing at the bar. He was like a photographer with a paintbrush, capturing real life in all its beautiful imperfection. Want to know something fascinating? These artists were able to paint outdoors thanks to a recent invention, paint in tubes. Before this, artists had to mix their own pigments, making outdoor painting practically impossible. This simple innovation helped launch an artistic revolution. The Impressionists broke every rule in the book. Instead of smooth, invisible brushstrokes, they used visible dots and dashes of pure color. Rather than working in studios, they painted on plain air, right in the middle of nature. They chose to paint modern life, steam trains, city streets, cafe scenes, rather than classical or historical subjects. Here's the irony. These paintings that were once ridiculed now sell for millions. Monet's gardens at Giverny, where he painted his famous water lilies, attract thousands of visitors every year. The very things that critics hated, the visible brushstrokes, the emphasis on light and atmosphere, the seemingly unfinished quality, are exactly what we now celebrate as groundbreaking artistic innovations. The Impressionists taught us something profound. Sometimes the most beautiful moments in life are the ones that don't last. A sunset, a smile, the play of light on water. These fleeting impressions can be more meaningful than any carefully staged scene. They showed us that art isn't just about what you see, but how you see it. And perhaps, most importantly, they proved that sometimes the most powerful thing an artist can do is break the rules. Every time you see a painter working outdoors, every time you admire how light plays across a canvas, you're seeing the legacy of these artistic revolutionaries who dared to paint the world, not as others said it should be, but as they truly saw it. Justine, as the 19th century drew to a close, something magical started happening in the streets of Europe. Imagine walking through Paris or Brussels and seeing buildings that looked like they'd grown straight out of a fairy tale, with curves and swirls inspired by nature itself. This was Art Nouveau, a movement that believed even the most ordinary objects could be transformed into works of art. Let me paint you a picture of Paris in 1899. The city was preparing for a new century, and underground, a modern marvel was taking shape. The metro system. But here's where the story gets interesting. Instead of just building plain, functional entranceways, the city commissioned an artist named Hector Guimard to create something extraordinary. Guimard's metro entrances became known as the dragonfly entrances because they looked like giant insects or exotic plants sprouting from the sidewalks. Made of sinuous iron and glass, these structures weren't just station markers. They were works of art that stopped pedestrians in their tracks. Some Parisians called them Guimard's Follies, but they quickly became beloved symbols of the city. Here's a fascinating detail most people don't know. Guimard designed these entrances to be mass-produced in a factory, yet each one looks uniquely handcrafted. He proved that even industrial production could create objects of stunning beauty. Of the original 141 entrances he designed, sadly only 86 remain today, making them precious architectural treasures. Art Nouveau wasn't just about public spaces. It transformed everything it touched. Artists and designers created furniture that seemed to grow like vines, jewelry that twisted like morning glory stems, and even everyday items like teapots and door handles became small masterpieces. They took inspiration from nature's most elegant forms: flower stems, butterfly wings, peacock feathers, and ocean waves. Want to hear something remarkable? This movement spread across Europe like wildfire, but each region gave it its own unique flavor. In Barcelona, Antoni Gaudí created buildings that looked like they were melting in the sun. In Glasgow, Charles Rennie Mackintosh developed his own distinctive style with elegant, elongated forms. In Vienna, they called it secession style, and it had a more geometric character. The philosophy behind Art Nouveau was revolutionary for its time. Why should art be confined to museums and galleries? Why couldn't every aspect of life be beautiful? These artists and designers believed that even a simple lamp or chair could lift the human spirit if it was thoughtfully and beautifully designed. This wasn't just about making pretty things. It was a reaction against the Industrial Revolution's mass production of ugly, soulless objects. Art Nouveau creators wanted to bring beauty back into everyday life, to remind people that even in an age of machines, human creativity and nature's beauty could still reign supreme. Think about it. Every time you see a decorative iron gate with flowing patterns or admire the curved lines of certain vintage designs, you're seeing the lasting influence of Art Nouveau. These artists taught us that functional doesn't have to mean boring, and that the boundary between art and everyday life is more fluid than we think. The movement might have been relatively short-lived, fading away with the outbreak of World War I, but its impact on design and architecture continues to inspire creators today. It showed us that beauty isn't just something to be observed from a distance. It's something that should surround us in every moment of our daily lives. As we wrap up our journey through the 19th century, let me share something remarkable with you. Every time you walk through a modern city, you're actually walking through a living museum of 19th century innovation. Think about it. Those grand train stations, the elegant department stores, the sweeping boulevards, they're all gifts from this extraordinary era. The 19th century wasn't just another 100 years in history. It was a revolutionary period that completely transformed how we think about art and architecture. And its influence? Well, that's everywhere you look. Those sleek glass and steel skyscrapers reaching into the clouds, they're the great-grandchildren of the Crystal Palace and the Eiffel Tower. Every time an architect uses iron and glass to create something spectacular, they're building on the foundations laid by those 19th century pioneers. Here's a fascinating detail that most people don't realize. Many of the artistic techniques we take for granted today were once radical innovations of the 19th century. When you see photographers playing with light and shadow, they're following in the footsteps of the Impressionists. Those beautiful Art Nouveau-inspired designs on modern products, they're echoing the vision of artists who believed that even everyday objects should be beautiful. Let me share something extraordinary about this legacy. In Paris, for example, the entire city centre is essentially a 19th century creation. Baron Haussmann's grand boulevards, which everyone associates with the romantic Paris of today, were all built during this period. What's amazing is that these weren't just streets. They were carefully designed to create perfect views of monuments and to bring light and air into the city. It was urban planning as an art form. And speaking of urban planning, here's a little-known fact. Many of the public parks we enjoy today, like Central Park in New York or the Bois de Boulogne in Paris, were created in the 19th century. These weren't just green spaces, they were carefully designed landscapes meant to bring nature into the industrial city. Even today, urban planners study these parks to understand how to create better cities. The 19th century taught us something profound, that art isn't just something you hang on a wall or put on a pedestal. It can be part of everyday life, from the buildings we live in to the objects we use. Every time a designer creates something both beautiful and functional, they're carrying forward the spirit of the 19th century. But perhaps the most important legacy of this era is the idea that art and architecture should reflect their time. The 19th century artists and architects weren't afraid to embrace new materials, new techniques, and new ideas. They showed us that tradition and innovation aren't enemies. They're partners in creating something meaningful. You know what's truly remarkable? Many of the challenges they faced then, balancing technology with human needs, finding beauty in an industrial world, making art accessible to everyone, these are still the challenges we're wrestling with today. In many ways, we're still building on the foundations they laid, still learning from their successes and their failures. The next time you walk through a city, take a moment to look around. Look up at those iron and glass arcades, those elegant stone facades, those flowing Art Nouveau details. They're not just old buildings, they're messages from an age of incredible creativity and innovation, reminding us that every generation has the power to reshape the world through art and architecture. As we reach the end of our journey through this remarkable century, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've discovered together. The 19th century wasn't just a time of incredible artistic innovation. It was a period that completely transformed how humans express themselves and how we shape the world around us. Think about the extraordinary path we've traveled. From the elegant simplicity of neoclassicism, reaching back to ancient wisdom for inspiration, to the bold rebellion of romanticism that taught us to embrace our emotions. We've witnessed how the Industrial Revolution gave birth to architectural marvels that seemed to defy gravity itself, and how the Impressionists dared to capture the fleeting beauty of everyday life. Finally, we saw how Art Nouveau brought beauty into every corner of daily existence. Each of these movements tells us something profound about the human spirit. They remind us that in times of great change, creativity doesn't just survive, it thrives. When society transforms, art transforms with it, reflecting our hopes, our fears, and our dreams of what might be possible. You know what's truly fascinating? The questions these artists and architects wrestled with are still relevant today. How do we balance tradition with innovation? How can we create beauty in an age of mass production? How do we make art that speaks to everyone, not just the elite? These 19th century pioneers were grappling with challenges that still shape our creative discussions today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. How do you see the influence of 19th century art and architecture in your own world? What elements of these movements speak to you the most? Maybe it's the revolutionary spirit of the Impressionists, the natural beauty of Art Nouveau, or the technological ambition of the Iron Architects. If you've enjoyed exploring this fascinating period with me, I invite you to join our community of history enthusiasts here at Modern Age Chronicles. By subscribing to our channel, you'll be part of an ongoing conversation about the amazing stories that shaped our world. Hit that subscribe button to ensure you don't miss our upcoming episodes, where we'll continue to uncover the hidden gems of history together. Don't forget to leave a like if you've enjoyed this journey through the 19th century, and share this video with friends who might appreciate these incredible stories of artistic innovation. Your engagement helps us keep bringing these fascinating historical tales to life. Thank you for being part of this exploration of one of history's most creative and transformative periods. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll discover more amazing stories from the past that continue to shape our present. Until then, keep looking at the world with the curious eyes of an artist and the bold spirit of an innovator. See you in our next historical adventure.